All right, Rifters, thanks for tuning in, subscribe, rate, and review. The great Alan Lee is back with us on this one. Alan, how are you?
Hey, very, very well. And yourself? I'm always glad to be back. Not that I leave that often, but I am back. So
Yeah,
yeah, man.
you have a record of like six
Yeah,
six in a row. That's
yeah,
the
that's
new
one of my best. I feel like that's like a sports record, and I'm a
sports.
fan span, and they've been
I
winning.
I gotta say, you look good. You look really healthy.
Well, I appreciate that.
You know,
And we're really very, very happy with our work, and I'm very comfortable here at Razor Riffs, and I know you are.
yeah.
Like my
Speaking of Razor Riffs, we're about to interview a comedy character actor legend. We're about
yeah,
to have him on the show.
yeah.
For the folks at home, you've seen him in Breaking Away. You've seen him in 16 Candles. You've seen him in Popeye. You've seen him in Runaway Bride. And you've seen him on the show Huge. And he also has a book coming out in October called Paul Dooley, American Dad, right?
That's the one.
The great Paul Dooley is going to join us
Yes, and
coming up next for the full hour on Razor Riffs.
A piece of Hollywood history, and we're very glad to have him on Razor Riffs. And we don't kid around. We got actors. We got people at the Playboy Mansion to come by. We got other people, but I don't want to go there right now. We got a nice guy coming on, and I'm happy. I've never been happier. And we'll just leave out some other people that I do respect and enjoy very much, but never mind. Anyway, listen, I'm having a great time. I'm looking forward to this because I'm a film freak, and
we're going to ask him some good, sophisticated questions coming up on Razor Riffs.
Sophisticated.
Yeah.
Got it.
Enjoy the show. Subscribe, rate, and review if you liked it.
Please do. And I don't know if there's no, my Patreon. Forget it.
You're listening to Reza Riffs with Keith Reza and Alan Lee, right here on LA Talk Radio.
I let him in right now. All right.
Oh shit.
Hey, Paul, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for doing the podcast.
My pleasure.
Paul, this is Alan Lee. He's the trusty sidekick. He's like my Robin.
How are you?
Very good. Glad to meet you, Mr. Dooley. And don't worry.
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Also, Paul, you started getting in the entertainment industry when you were a young kid. You were doing sketch cartooning, right? And then you did radio. Like, because now it's all about podcasting, where radio and cartoons were huge back in your day. Like, what was that transition?
Before I was interested in acting, I wanted to be an artist, and it drifted from regular art into cartooning. Mm-hmm. And then I saw a silent film of Buster Keaton, decided I wanted to be an actor.
Yeah.
And the trivia part of it is 30 years later, I met him and did a commercial with him.
Oh, what was that like? Were you like totally stoked?
Oh, are you kidding? I mean, he was, I thought he was the king, the best, with sound or without sound, the best comedy actor I'd ever met, I'd ever seen. So that was a thrill to have that happen.
And then, like, it's also interesting because you started with these cartoons, and then you ended up in one of the biggest movies to start off that generation with Popeye.
Yeah, I played the cartoon character.
Yeah. So, like, well, because like now if you watch it, it's one of those movies that the first time you watch it, you're like, but after the next time you watch it, you're like, oh my God, this is actually really good. You know what I mean?
Well, you find things in it. You can watch it 2 or 3 times, say, oh, I didn't notice that little thing happening. It was peopled with lots of clowns and mimes. I mean, Bill Irwin was in it, who became very famous later as a mime. And we had some clowns from Italy because we filmed it in Malta off the coast of Sicily in the Mediterranean. So we had 50 actors, and every one of them had a different kind of talent. A lot of physical comedians, a lot of guys on ladders and tumbling and somersaults and all kinds of great stuff.
Yeah. And then the set was very unique too. And I just imagine back in that day, like it must have been like Academy Award winning set. You know what I mean?
It's one of the best sets I've ever seen. And it all was built from scratch. There was nothing there. It was in a little bay, kind of a blue-green, beautiful Caribbean-looking bay. But the beach wasn't a beach. It was a rubble of stones. And if you walked on it, each step would be up a foot or down a foot. It was just impossible to tread it. They dredged out all those stones and made it into a village.
Oh,
and
my
they
God.
built it with new lumber, but it was painted and distressed to look 100 years old.
Yeah.
And the actors believed after a while we weren't living in Malta. We were living in Sweet Haven.
Yeah.
If you're shooting 12 hours a day there and then you sleep, you feel like you lived in that beautifully designed village of Sweet Haven. And Robert Altman told the designers, I don't want any facades like Hollywood fake facades. I want every house to have four sides and roofs, so that they're real. And if I want to take my camera behind the house, it'll still be a house. So for us, it was a very real place, not a made up place.
Now I have a question because you played Wimpy, and we'll sidetrack from Popeye in a second, but I just had to ask this: did you eat all those hamburgers, or like what was? Because that was a lot of hamburgers.
That's a very interesting story about hamburgers. In the first week or so, I found that the particular meat that we got for hamburgers, which we didn't get it from that island, it was shipped in from Germany or something.
Right.
And it wasn't very good. And I knew I didn't want to spend all that whole shoot eating hamburgers. I only wanted to look like I was eating hamburgers. So I've also been a magician in my time, and I know a little about what they call misdirection.
Right.
So in the first week we had a very big budget, and we had a great group of prop makers. I asked them to make me a hamburger out of latex rubber, that it looked like it had tomato and lettuce and burger on it.
Right.
And then I said, but make it look like it has one bite out of it. So at the beginning of a scene, I would be chewing on nothing and holding a hamburger with one bite out of it. So that's how I never ate any hamburgers.
Oh my God.
Later, they made me a latex rubber burger with 2 bites out and a half a burger. I could choose what I wanted to do. I started by faking the chewing and holding the burger. And from my long experience in the commercial business, I know that if you want something focused on, like a prop, you don't hold it in front of a costume. In a commercial, you hold it up here.
Yeah.
So that you see it without the costume, and it keeps it in the clear. My hamburger is always held off to one side, even farther than that.
That's very
As
interesting.
I'm walking through the streets, I'd always hold my burger off to one side.
That's great.
Misdirection.
Yeah.
Never had to eat terrible burgers.
That's very interesting because I did a Skippy commercial once when I was like 8, and I ate like a whole, like so much peanut butter. I've ate so much peanut butter in that commercial that I don't think I could ever eat peanut butter again.
Guess what? I made a Skippy commercial too for peanut butter. Yeah, I was a grown-up though. And I was wearing a dog suit.
Yeah.
Skippy dog. Oh no, there's a Skippy. I think there was a Skippy dog food and a Skippy peanut butter.
Yeah.
All I know is I made a commercial. I was in a dog suit, and they were plugging some kind of coupon that comes with the jar. And they said there's a contest, and if you win the contest, you get 2 tickets to Honolulu for a vacation. I'm a dog, by the way.
Yeah.
And the voiceover tells us that. And he said, I guess a free trip to Hawaii is about as expensive as what you paid for that dog suit. And I said, what dog suit? At the end, I was asked to hold up the product. And there was no line. I just held the product up, but instead of a line, I said, woof. It's the whole thing. When I started making movies, I stopped making commercials, of which I made tons of commercials. But my last one was Skippy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's nice that we have that in common. But in the pandemic, I wrote a book about my life, which will come out later this year. And I also looked through my old, there used to be a thing called a Week at a Glance book where you could put your appointments in it. Right.
And all commercial actors carried it. It was just this big, put it in your pocket. And it had Monday through Sunday. And I put all my appointments, all my auditions. And whenever I got the job that I booked the job that I auditioned for, I would make a check mark. I kept all those books, 15 years of them. They're just really small books.
Wow.
I went through them during the pandemic and counted them. And I had 640 commercials. 25% were on camera and 75% were radio commercials. And I made 640 commercials in 15 years.
Nice.
And at the same time, I was doing plays in New York. I was in the original Threepenny Opera. I did The Odd Couple on Broadway with Mathau and Art Carney.
Yeah.
And a lot of other plays off Broadway and traveling on the road and different things. But in terms of paying the rent, being in a play didn't pay anything near as well as a commercial with residuals.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting that you mentioned The Odd Couple, because that was written by the great Neil Simon, who, was probably, when you're a young incomer, his biggest comedy name ever. So what was that?
Yeah, it was. I was in, I think it was in his third play. And then thereafter, he wrote about 40 of them. But the first one was Come Blow Your Horn. The next one was Barefoot in the Park. And then he wrote The Odd Couple.
Yeah.
But at one time, Barefoot, Odd Couple, and 2 others were playing in New York at the same time, all directed by Mike Nichols. And he became one of the most successful Broadway directors, and Neil Simon, one of the most successful playwrights, probably as well known as Shakespeare, or certainly more well known than Eugene O'Neill and Tennessee Williams and Arthur Miller, because he wrote so many plays and movies he wrote.
And you've
he
also
wrote for television.
You've also done Neil Simon movies too, which is cool.
Yeah, a lot of them.
Yeah.
He wrote one with Everybody Got Killed Off. And in a program for the theater, it says names in order of appearance.
Yeah.
But for this movie, it says names in order of disappearance. They all got killed off. It was called Murder by Death by Neil Simon.
Yeah, that's I want to see that. That's hilarious. So it was you. Who else was in that?
I don't know. People like Peter Falk. A lot of people, pretty well-known people in it.
Yeah,
they're all pretty well known. It's a little bit like an Agatha Christie murder,
right?
Then There Were None, one of her titles. They all got knocked off, and they don't know which one of them killed which one of them. Who was the killer in this movie? But I know Peter Falk was among them.
Was that the one?
Well-known actors.
Was that the one where the butler was like, "Oh, you can't come to this room. She was killed by suicide." And
I
then
don't remember. Can't remember. I think Dom DeLuise was in it too.
yeah, okay. So I have seen
Yeah.
it. It was very fun.
Yeah, I knew Don very well. I did a summer series with him, 12 episodes of a summer variety show.
Yeah.
So I knew him pretty well.
Now, when you were doing plays and stuff, were you still doing stand-up, or did you just pause that?
My stand-up, I got on the Tonight Show in a kind of a fluky way because I wasn't as prepared for it as I should have been. I had been doing stand-up for maybe 6 months, and I'd only done about 10 bookings. So to get on the Tonight Show, many people say you need to be on the road for 7 years or 5 years, and you hone down your 6 minutes to the best you could ever be. Well, I didn't even have time to hone it down.
Wow.
I didn't have enough jobs to get really slick at it. But somehow I got on the Tonight Show, and they asked me to come back a couple of weeks later, and I didn't have a routine. I didn't have enough stuff.
Wow.
So a friend of mine was Alan Alda, and I said, "Would you help me write a visit to the Tonight Show, a monologue?" But what you want to have is a monologue that's been tried and true with audiences,
Right.
not cold, not just doing it cold. But we wrote something together, and I did it on my second visit to the Tonight Show, and worked like crazy. And he was a good friend of mine for a long time. He's a wonderful man, wonderful guy.
So you had a joke writer during your comedy days.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I did
awesome.
that. Over time, I became so familiar with comedy through writers and also just by observation of comedy that I actually became a very good comedy writer.
Yeah.
And they're very good at writing sketches. And in the Electric Company, I wrote a lot of sketches.
That's right.
Did you do sketches in the Second City?
Sure, that's all sketches.
Oh,
It's
nice.
all sketchy.
There's a few songs in it. There's no dancing. It's all improv.
Yeah.
I worked with Alan Arkin and many people like that.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome. And then you got like your first big movie pretty later in your life, like I would say early 40s. Yeah.
I was 49.
49. So
And Robert Altman hired me, and then I did about 5 movies kind of close together
yeah.
for him. One was Popeye.
And then I wanted to ask you what's it like being the guy where you're the star and then transitioning to being a supporting actor and then just being like the dad type of character? What was that transition like?
I was almost always the supporting character. In the add up everything, I was only having really leading roles in a few movies. One was called, by Altman, was called A Perfect Couple.
Perfect Couple.
Which I was starring in. And in a few television shows, I had leading roles. But I would say 95% of my acting has been character parts where you're not the lead, but you're a character person. But when you start at 49, you're already not the leading man.
Yeah.
You're going to be a character actor. But I like character acting better than leading roles anyway, because when I was a kid, I would watch a movie and I thought the male leads were boring because they had to kiss the girl and they had to do the plot and they had to do scenes that weren't interesting just to tell the story.
Right.
Whereas the funny character comedians, those guys with a few scenes, they often could steal the movie,
Yeah. They could really make those scenes more interesting.
Yeah. A little more colorful. You don't have to bother you're not telling the whole plot. You're just doing a few scenes and they might be very funny.
Now, you did also Breaking Away, which I feel is one of the most perfect movies ever.
That's the best thing I ever did.
Yeah.
The best part I ever had.
So what was that like? Like, did you know that was going to be such a great masterpiece when you were filming it?
I knew the writing was incredibly good. I went to an audition and Peter Yates, the director, and Steve Tessich, the writer, met me there and they handed me a script and said, just read this and take your time. We'll be in the office all afternoon. well, it's going to take me an hour to read it or something.
Right.
They said, don't worry about it. We'll still be here. Then I read about 10 pages. I said, this character is so much like my father. I could do this in my sleep, because it was just like my father, who never smiled. I mean, as it turns out, I had an arc in Breaking Away where I got a little more friendly with my son at the end when he was winning the race.
Yeah.
But up to that point, I was kind of grumpy and cranky with him. But I used my father as a model, because my father was a guy who never laughed or never smiled, just worked his whole life. And that's all he knew was work. And
Yeah.
he wasn't affectionate, or, he wasn't demonstrative with the children. But I grew up with that as my role model. Then I began to play those roles on film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, sounds like my dad too. So we got that in common.
Sounds like a lot of dads. Leave it to the mom to raise the kids.
Right.
Dad just wants to do what he wants to do.
Yeah. And
But
then
he was a nice guy. I mean, he wasn't mean or anything. He just was, he himself was, he didn't know how to be a dad. His dad had abandoned the family.
right.
He grew up without a dad. He didn't know how to be one.
Yeah. I think
But,
I think a
I've
lot of
used him as
dads
a
have
role-
that too.
I've used him as a role model many, many times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Anyway,
you also
I thought the best script I ever read for a movie, or even one of the best scripts I've ever even seen in a movie, was that script for Breaking Away. It was just absolutely wonderful.
yeah.
So what happened was I was reading it, and they came out and said, gee, we're sorry, we're called away. We can't audition you right now, but could you come tonight to a meeting over at Universal, I think, or Paramount, one of those places. And then you can read there. When I got there, instead of it being a 3-page audition, which is common, 3 or 4
Right.
pages, it was a table read, and all the actors had been cast except the dad. So I had a chance to read every scene that I had in the movie as an audition. So after 5 minutes, I'm getting all kind of laughs through the character. I said, I've already got this job, because the response was so good. The room had about 10 people we called the suits, the guys from the network, or the guys from the movie studio.
Right.
So it was like a real audience. And the others were getting laughs too, but my character is more of a funny character. I knew just very shortly after we started, because of all the laughs I was getting, thanks to the writer also, that I would get the part, which I did.
Wow. And that's very interesting, because that probably doesn't happen a lot, right? They probably
No, it
make
doesn't.
you
That was a unique way to audition, is to audition the whole movie. If I had something like 12, 13 or 14 scenes, it was like a real full audition. They knew what I could do right away. So at the end of the table read, they said, you've got the part.
Wow.
Oh, nice.
That must have been
And
the
while we
best
were doing it,
meeting
I was
ever.
I didn't know how I would be perceived. I enjoyed it, but you can't know how you're going to be realized. But I knew that this writer was absolutely brilliant. A good, quick example. One of my first scenes, I'm at the breakfast table. My wife was saying, I have to eat this healthy food because I'd had a heart attack.
Right.
And I have a fly swatter in my hand and killing flies. My son comes in and gives me a trophy and tries to be an Italian and annoys the hell out of me. And I said, what is that thing I'm smelling? She said, that's his scent. It's Parfumo Napolitano.
Oh,
It's the name of an Italian perfume that
Right.
my son is wearing. And I could have said anything and got a laugh, like tell him to take a shower, tell him he's not allowed in the kitchen, tell him to live outside. I could have said 10 things and got a chuckle.
Right.
But instead, the writer said, well, the flies seem to like it. Bang. I mean, the writing was so clean, so
Crisp.
crisp, and so off the mark, and not like anything anybody else would write.
Yeah.
And almost every line I had was, I said, for example, he said, "Ciao, Papa, ciao, Mama." And I said, I'm not your papa, I'm your goddamn father, and she's your goddamn mother. So every line had comedy in it. If you'd done it on the stage, you would get laughs. About a month or two before the pandemic, we read this play out loud on a stage in LA with all the other parts cast. Some of the originals are available.
Yeah.
Jackie Earle Haley and Dan Stern. A lot of these people are available, and a few of them weren't. But we did it for a live audience, so I could get those laughs all over again live. That was in December of 2019.
Wow. That must have been awesome, because I'm like a huge Daniel Stern fan. So just reading that live with him must have been amazing.
And he was so good in that.
Yeah.
He said, "My father loves it when I fail." He said, "I may take the college exam entrance and fail it. My father loves it when I fail." I think I'll do that. His birthday's coming up.
Oh.
Every time he opened his mouth, it's great writing.
Yeah.
He said, "Do you ever feel like one of those cartoons and you get hit by a frying pan in the face and then you go like, and you go back to normal?"
Yeah.
I feel like that all the time.
Well, because the guy I toured with before he passed, like, he was a big Daniel Stern fan too. And like, I said this, I was like, I always thought Daniel Stern was Jim Carrey before Jim Carrey. You know what I mean?
He was a little bit.
Yeah, because his humor was so unique.
One of his good jobs was he was the voiceover narrator in Wonder Years,
which you also did, right?
I did one episode, as a soccer coach. Yeah, I've done one of everything. About 125 TV shows.
Wow. Now,
and some of them were recurring parts. I was on Star Trek Deep Space Nine 4 times. I was on 4 times of My So-Called Life, which my wife wrote.
Yeah.
I was on about 12 different shows where I had 4, 5, 6 recurring characters.
Now, you worked on Huge with your daughter. Have you ever done anything besides that with her?
No, she and my wife wrote that together.
Yeah.
I was in every episode. If they weren't family, I probably wouldn't have done it, because sometimes I had one line as the camp cook. I said, "No seconds." And then normally I would turn down a part that brief.
Right.
But I did, I think, 10 of them.
Yeah.
And my wife's brother was a cinematographer, could have called the production company Nepotism Inc. But most of it, I just had a few lines. Once they had a talent show and I juggled, because that's something else I could do. But at the end, she wrote me a very nice part where I had to tell my daughter, who was Black in the film, that she has a sister and I'm leaving. I'm not going to stay there working for her.
Right.
And she said, "What? Wait a minute. Where were you when I was 14? You left me."
Yeah.
So it was a great dramatic scene she wrote for me. And I said, "I have to go. She's doing drugs. Her mother won't help her. She'll go to jail." I had tears in my eyes. And she wrote such a beautiful scene. There's a moment where my daughter, who is Black, says, after a pause, she hated this woman who's her enemy, the sister that I spent time with.
Right.
So she says to me after a pause, "What's her name?" Which means she's softening because she has a sister, whether she likes it or not. And my wife put in one of the most beautiful names she could have, Violet.
Oh, that's a pretty name.
And then I said, "She's in trouble and she needs me." And I start to get tears in my eyes.
Oh.
And she comes over and comforts me. So it's a beautiful piece of writing. But that was the main episode where I had a good part. The rest of it, I was helping out.
Now, so that sounds like a very dramatic part, where I'm used to you being more of a comedic actor. Like, what was that like the transition? Do you find drama being as hard as comedy, or do you find it?
Well, before I met Robert Altman, I was actually afraid of doing straight parts or reluctant to do straight parts. I thought I knew how to handle and how to get laughs and how to be a comic character, but I used to shy away from straight parts in plays.
Yeah.
But he cast me in the movie A Wedding, and I was the father of the bride, and I was kind of a cranky guy, but it was dramatic too. And even though I was afraid of it and reluctant, when I saw the dailies, I had this epiphany. I thought, oh, I do it pretty good with straight drama. Then I said, oh, I get it. If you have comedy timing, you have drama timing. Timing is just timing.
Right.
I meant it was comedians with good timing, but every great actor has good timing. You know? Yeah. I just saw Denzel do Macbeth, and he has great timing. You know?
Yeah. But do you think timing is more of a comedic thing that because that
I
goes
thought
with
it
this?
was.
Yeah.
I always thought it was, because you hear about comedy with good timing, especially a guy like Jack Benny, who took lots of time with his timing.
Yeah.
Whereas another guy who talks faster, like Lou Costello, has another kind of timing, but it's all timing. But I never knew the word timing applied to drama. Then I discovered it when I started doing movies, because I've done more drama in movies than comedy. It's
Right.
only when I've been used by Christopher Guest in 3 films and Larry David in his films that I did a lot of comedy and improvised it in both of those shows. But I'd say, a large part of my film work and TV work is drama, and part of it is comedy.
Now, when you because you've worked with a lot of great writers who write these great scripts, like John Hughes, Neil Simon, Christopher Guest. When you get a script, do you ever get the okay to change a line to fit your dynamics, or do you just do it how it's written?
I tend to do what people would call behaving myself and saying that the writer wrote this, they bought it, the director bought it, the stars came on, they like that script, and I feel it's not my place to improve it. Although secretly in my head, I know times where I can improve it.
Right.
Once in a while, I will suggest a line to somebody. I never suggested anything in Breaking Away. It was such a perfect script.
Yeah.
I suggested something which got a laugh, though. I said to Steve Tetzich, the writer, I said to the costumer, I want to wear a pocket protector with 20 pens in it, right?
Yeah.
That means 9 pens. And they said, okay. So I had a pocket protector with several pens in it. I said to the writer, when I get in my pajamas, can I wear the pocket protector with the pens? And he says, very funny, but it's a little too much, a little too far. So instead, when she took the rose from her hair and put it on the bedside table to prepare for a night of fun, I removed the pocket protector from my pajamas in a provocative way and got a laugh.
Yeah.
It's my way of flirting with her. I'm getting serious about making love because I'm taking out my pens. That's like introducing something, but I didn't write it. I mean, it's just an idea that I did. But I didn't dare to improve Neil Simon or Steve Tetzich, who won the Oscar for the script, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I have 3 more questions, and I want to respect your time, but this is probably a movie not a lot of people give you compliments about, but My Boyfriend's Back, which I grew up I thought that was one of the funniest movies. What was that like? Where it's a script
directed by my friend Bob Balaban.
Yeah.
Who worked with me in all the Chris Guest movies, and who directed me in that, My Boyfriend's Back.
Yeah.
It was originally called
He's Dead and Loving It or something? Or
something like that. Not that. No, it's called Johnny Zombie. The guy dies and comes back for the prom. Yeah. Balaban's a good friend. That's finished writing my book, and I sent it to him, and I said, if you have time, I'd like you to read it and give me a quote for the book.
Oh.
And he said to me, I'll already give you a quote. It's a home run.
Oh, that's awesome.
but he's a good friend of mine. I did several plays with him, and he directed me in Johnny Zombie. But that was, they had, all the kids had no names. They weren't famous kids, but they played the leads.
Yeah.
So he got all these great people, about 10 of them from New York actors. Cloris Leachman was in it. Edward Herman was in it. Mary Beth Hurt was in it. And they were all well-known actors. But he beefed up the cast because the teenagers didn't have reputations or experience.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of fun. And I said, I had a line, I came and I played a guy named Big Chuck.
Yeah.
And my son was played by Philip Seymour Hoffman
Yeah.
as a school bully.
Oh.
And I came into a room and he's dead. There was an altercation in the hallway, the hallway of the school, and someone took an axe out of the glass box and they pulled it back, and by accident they buried the axe into the head of Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Right.
I go to the mad doctor's office, not an office, a big lab. And the great actor Austin Pendleton was the doctor. One of the greatest lines in movies was in that scene. I walk in, he's dead with an axe in his head. It was a farce.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, oh, my son, oh my God, what am I going to do? My son. I says, doctor, and he says to me, he's not doing as well as we had hoped. And then the better line comes, the topper line was, I looked at him and I said, he's dead, you idiot, he's dead. And Austin Pendleton says, everybody's a doctor. Now that's a killer line.
That's a great line. And it's interesting because Austin Pendleton is also a playwright too. So, you know,
everything, he directs.
Yeah. So
Yeah, he's great. He's very talented. He did tons of plays, and he writes, he directs.
Yeah. And then your book that you wrote during the pandemic, is this a memoir or is this a
Memoir? Yeah.
Memoir. Yeah. Sorry, I have a speech stuck. But so that's
it's a hard word to say. One of my lines in it, one of the lines I wrote in the book was, I don't know what I'm doing writing a book about my life. I can't even spell memoir. But I spelled it MEM-WAR.
That's how I spell it, I think.
That's what most people would spell it. First of all, it's French. Who the hell knows?
Yeah. And then
the book comes out in October.
Oh, that's gonna be cool.
It's called Movie Dad. It's the hook of the book is that I became the father of 25 different actors in movies. And it's called Movie Dad.
Great.
And when you play a dad to all these 25 different actors, like, do you feel like, oh, okay, like, do you ever love certain ones better? You know what I mean? Like, oh, I love that child. You know what I mean? Because
no, they're a lot the same. But there are two of them that are fairly well known. One is Runaway Bride with Julia Roberts,
my favorite movie.
But another one is the most iconic of all the dads I ever played. It's with Molly Ringwald in 16 Candles.
Yeah.
And the cover of my book has a picture of me and Molly.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, she's on the couch trying to go to sleep, and I'm sitting on the couch talking to her. But it's a very, very famous scene with young women.
Yeah.
I meet women all the time, sometimes on the street, used to be, now it's on a letter or a Zoom or a phone call saying, I wish you had been my dad. So there must be something inherent in me that I don't do that seems like I'm a good dad. Then if you get a good script, it's even better.
I feel like that's like a compliment, because if everyone knows you as like their dad, you know, they grew up you know what I mean? It's kind of like Bob Saget on Full House. Everyone loves.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
That's right. People identify with you. They bring something to the table about not having a father who might be understanding.
Yeah.
And a lot of dads aren't.
That's true.
And
now,
like my dad.
Alan, do you have any last second questions for the great Mr. Paul Dooley?
Well, I tell you, he's a piece of history, and he scanned so many decades that so many things were happening. working with Nichols and Altman. Did you fall into voiceovers, like your voiceover work in Cars and even one of my favorites, Batman animated?
No, I really didn't do many for films. I just did a lot of voiceovers in commercials.
In commercials, okay.
I did a combination of on-camera commercials, voiceover commercials, and tons of radio.
Okay.
You know.
Very good.
But I had a lot of experience on radio.
Yeah, no, that's a great segue because radio.
And much of it was created by myself and two other actors. We had a little boutique, a little ad agency of our own, where people came to us and said, "Here's the product. Here's what we want to say. Now you make it up." So we put the comedy with the copy points, we called them.
Oh,
and it started as a humorous beginning and a humorous ending. And in the middle, we'd have talk about the product in a funny way.
We bought that for our podcast, that plan.
That was actually the last question I wanted to ask you, is when you did radio, you know, you probably had all these great moments of comedy, but you only could listen to it live because like if you do this podcast will be up in the airways forever. You know what I mean? For when,
yeah, sure.
After we all die, it'll still be there. But when you do it in the radio, it seems like there's no way we could find those out anymore. You know what I mean?
Probably not. I kept a great many copies of my favorites. You know, I might have 30 or 40 of them, but many of them I don't have a copy of because the ad agencies didn't necessarily give you copies. You had to ask a favor.
Yeah.
But we did some very funny ones. Andrew Duncan and Lynn Lipton were two people from Second City. So we could improvise them. And if the client wanted us to, we'd type up a script for them. But we didn't need it because we remembered our improv. And we got so good at it that we had a clock in our head. And we knew as we were doing it about how long 60 seconds would be. Because we just had that clock in our mind. You know, some people. I'm sure the quarterback who's waiting for the delay of game, you know, that time.
Yeah.
He knows how many seconds he has to get that ball.
Yeah.
It's just instinct, you know. So we got good at knowing how long 30 seconds was or 60 seconds.
Well, you should release the ones you have. Give the folks some release, you know what I mean? Like
I don't have time to listen to them all, but I have certain favorites that are I take a couple of them and put them in a script form in my book that were my very favorites.
Awesome.
There was a product called Burlington Mills where they made fabric. And we were selling something called worsted wool for a company that made clothing. So my partner and I did Orville and Wilbur getting ready to go on the famous flight. You know, the first airplane.
Yeah.
And it was very, very funny stuff in it. I said to him, "Good morning, Orville. Good morning, Wilbur. It's a great day." He says, "Yes, and you look great." "Well, that's because I'm wearing worsted." He said, "What? Worsted? What do you mean worsted?" "Worsted wool." "Wool worsted?" "Yeah, wool made the worsted way." He said, "Well, it looks great on you." "That's because it holds its shape so well. Today's going to be the day we make aviation history." He says, "What's aviation?" "Never mind." I said, "But when I land this airplane, I want to be dressed in my best." He said, "So you dress in your worsted?" "That's right." He says, "Orville, when you're right, you're right." And he said, "Oh, brother." I says, "Well, the plane has landed. We should go home now." He says that. And I said, "No, I want to wait a little bit longer." He says, "Well, everyone's left. Landed the plane an hour ago." I said, "No, but still waiting for the luggage." So at this, we had certain radio commercials that played for 6 months or a year that were favorites of ours. And they were all good because we were good at it.
Oh my God. Well, that was so great. Thank you for sharing that with us. That was awesome. That's a good note. That's a good note to ask, where can the folks at home follow you and support you?
Well, I do have a website called Paul Dooley Actor, www.pauldooleyactor. Just created a website.
Great.
Well, Mr. Dooley, thank you so much for saying yes, and thank you for riffing with us. It was an honor.
And your title.
I also have a thing called Paul Dooley Films at AOL.com email.
Oh, awesome. So they could email you. Cool.
Yeah, if they wanted to.
Wonderful.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It was awesome.
Nice to talk to you.
And the title of your book, Paul, one more time, if you don't mind.
Movie Dad.
Movie Dad. Movie Dad.
It's a picture of me and Molly Ringwald.
Oh, boy.
It comes out in October.
October, yeah.
We're going to plug that when it comes out for you.
Thanks. Call me back sometime you feel like it.
Yeah, definitely. We would love to
You
have
know how
you.
to do it. Call me after the book comes out.
Will do. All right.
Take care,
Thanks,
guys.
Paul. Have a great night. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
talking to us.
Great meeting.
Take care. Nice meeting you.
All right. Cool. So that was the interview with Paul Dooley. Guys, subscribe, rate, review, and tell a friend. Alan, you got any last things to say to the folks at home?
Well, neither you or I are a dad. And I'm glad that Paul explained that to us.
All righty. We'll see you guys next week. Thank you.
All right.
You're listening to Reza Riffs with Keith Reza and Alan Lee, right here on LA Talk Radio.